Welcome one more day to Vital en Armonía. This is class 2 of the module 2, which is about alimentation. Last time we saw the correlation of different foods, nutrients with the Sephirotic tree. And today we are going to see the reason why radical diets do not work, cannot work, and why more than a diet, what we need is a completely different way of understanding nutrition, taking into consideration, of course, the understanding of the tree of life. Let's remember that we have three main foods. Breathing is already a way of feeding our body. Then water was another element associated with wisdom. Air was correlated with the crown of life, opening space. And the water is correlated with wisdom because it mirrors and it adapts itself to different circumstances. It's flexible. The way we eat mirrors the way we think and feel. Then, if you recall, the sphere of understanding, Binah, is correlated with physical foods, which are obviously important in this physical world. But don't forget that we have also a spiritual food. In the sphere of Da'at Elyon, elevated knowing between wisdom and understanding, we have a food called values, impressions. We need to feed our soul with certain qualities, such as the sense of unity, truth, honesty, dignity, beauty. All those are values, qualities perceived by means of conscience, mentally and emotionally. And we can perceive those values with others, or even paying attention to the natural, or rather natural world, the proportions, the colors. All that can feed our soul if we pay attention closely. Even though what feeds our soul the most are healthy relations with the world, others. Understanding also the correlation of certain foods with their remaining spheres. Remember that Hesed, mercy, is correlated with sugars because there is an emotional connection, as we saw. Proteins are associated with the sphere of force, obviously. Then we have fats, which are correlated with the sphere of beauty, Tiferet. Remember that fats also have a protective role and for building up tissues as well, all of which is connected to certain proportions in the body. The sphere of Netzach, victory over emotions, is connected to vitamins. Then the sphere of Od, the mind, is connected to minerals. And finally, the sphere of Yesod, the growth of vitality, is the result of digesting several elements and preparing them to manifest in the physical world, known as Malkut. And this physical world is our Malkut, which is usually known as kingdom. I'd say mostly because it's a kingdom of hierarchies and life and death. But in true reality, there is no kingdom. There is an oligarchy, and food is completely spiritual. But since we are in a physical world, obviously, we need physical food as well, because humanity fell from the tree of life after eating from the tree of knowledge of good and bad, mixing up twisted ideas and beliefs, following its own science, which is the reason why humanity keeps dying, keeps getting sick, and getting involved in destructive ways. This is the reason why we also have popular diets, which are somehow an attempt to recover some health, but people cannot attain that health by means of the popular diets, because many elements must be involved, not just physical food, but also the mind, the emotions, conscience. So what we need is an original way of understanding everything from a holistic perspective. So let's see now those popular diets and why they don't work. There is a very common idea out there among many people which says that sugar is bad. Don't eat sugar. That's horrible. Well, eat just protein or fat. And this is ironical because the human body needs sugar to survive. It's one of the most important elements. Our blood is full of glucose. Sugar, light and water and minerals and certain vitamins are the most important elements for the physical body. And those are micronutrients, not macronutrients, which are the ones that supposedly the human body needs according to nutrition experts and doctors. But this is because they don't understand the human body. They think the human body is like an oven that burns fats and sugars. And that's an obsolete paradigm which actually comes from the 19th century. But we are in the 21st century. So we should move on and recover a very ancient idea actually, which sees the physical human body as an alchemical organism that transforms micronutrients into certain macronutrients, tissues. And therefore, we should not focus so much on what nutrition experts call carbohydrates, fats, proteins. And we also must understand why people that follow these ideas are constantly moving from one diet to another. They cannot stay stable. For instance, those who consume the so-called paleo diet, which is very popular nowadays, get rid of carbohydrates, most carbohydrates. They just eat very small amounts of fruit and maybe some vegetables, but most of the diet consists of animal protein, fish, meat, a little bit of dairy, and some vegetables. Because they think that's how our ancestors live. There is even a theory which says the human brain evolved by means of the consumption of flesh, animal flesh, something which is completely false. There is no scientific basis for that. There was cannibalism and also flesh eating in prehistoric times, but that doesn't mean the brain evolved that way. The human being in ancient times had a very different diet, even before consuming starches, as we are going to see. But notice how those who consume the paleo diet eventually feel a lack for something, they crave for a starch, because they have not gone through a process of cleansing, and therefore they have certain craves, because obviously when you only eat meat, eggs, and salads, and very little amount of fruit, you expel that matter very quickly because it doesn't leave residue. And fruit has a certain purifying effect because it's more natural. But people following the paleo diet eventually increase the amount of starch. They start to introduce some starchy vegetables such as potatoes. Now, among those paleo thinkers. There is an even more radical group which consumes raw meat, raw fish, raw eggs, raw dairy, raw everything, because they think that's much healthier, because it preserves all the vitamins, minerals, enzymes. Obviously, vitamins get destroyed at 60 degrees centigrade and enzymes get destroyed at 40 degrees centigrade. So it's true that by cooking meat, pasteurizing milk, or cooking eggs, you get rid of vitamins. That's true, but this doesn't mean that's more natural or more healthy. Obviously, it's expelled better because it doesn't leave much residue. The starch leaves lots of residue and that congests. This is why starch eaters have mucus problems inside and therefore also bacterial overgrowth and other problems. But it doesn't mean eating raw is better. For one reason. First of all, you have to expend lots of money. And second, you are promoting the industry, which provides those foods in a certain way. None of those raw eaters are hunters. They don't know how to hunt in nature. They would be left alone one winter in the mountains and they would probably die, many of them. So those are not natural conditions. I don't even think hunting is a natural condition for the human being. Not even a natural condition at all, because this world is completely fallen. It's the result of unnatural conditions, not generated by humans, by the way, but by fallen architects. I have explained this many times. And let's also remember the human being did not evolve from the apes. So many of those theories that promote animal protein as a source of nutrition are mistaken. As I said, gorillas don't eat eggs, sticks, fish, nor any other animal meat in general, and they are stronger than any of the weightlifters, the heaviest, strongest men in the world. Now, some others go to another extreme, which is the so-called ketogenic diet. And they say consume only fats, animal fats and vegetable fats, and fast for 16 hours a day to promote the production of ketones, which is something the body does in conditions of emergency. So the ketogenic condition is quite pathological, actually. Obviously, fats don't leave much residue, so they are expelled very quickly. And this is why people think they are healthier. It's the same thing that happened with the proteins. The body doesn't know what that is, so it expels it almost immediately. Without obstruction, there is a very good flow. And people claim to have more energy, more stability, but just for a time. Actually, I know people that have tried this diet and eventually they introduce some proteic vegetable like mushrooms or kale or other things which they believe are more nutritious. They still think proteins are better than sugars, and this is actually their mistake, because the body needs sugar, so it craves for sugar. And there are complex sugars and simple sugars. So the most important are the simple sugars, not the complex sugars found in starches. So it's really a tragedy to call carbohydrates to everything. Simple sugars, complex sugars. Those are not the same. Our body needs simple sugars. Now, apart from those, we also have another extreme group which call themselves vegans. Some are vegans because of ideological reasons. They don't want to promote the slaughtering of animals and the mistreatment of animals, which is very real. And others are vegans because of health reasons. However, most of them ignore very basic facts. It is true that the food industry is mistreating animals. It's a total shame how farmers extract milk from cows using machines, submitting animals to stress conditions. It's a shame how many slaughterhouses kill the animals mercilessly. There are many videos about that, and no one can deny that. Obviously, it's necessary to stop all that. However, what most vegans do not take into consideration is that the food that they eat mostly, which are basically starches as a base, require extensive harvests that are not possible without getting rid of animal habitats. So indirectly, they are also killing animals, because if animals don't have a place to live, they have to go out, maybe to other conditions that are not fit for them, and so they die. They are deprived of their natural area to hunt, to eat, to sleep, just because vegans want to have their tofu, their seitan, their strange mixes. And there is another problem, which is psychological. They crave for seitan because they crave for meat unconsciously. Maybe they were meat eaters and they stopped eating meat, so now they have a fake meat called seitan, or a fake cheese made with tofu, which is soy, actually, a legume, and that is also mucus-producing foods. And all those foods congest and inflame the body more than anything, more even than fats alone or animal protein alone. So this is the reason why vegans end up having health problems. Some of them get their teeth rotten if they have consumed much fruit, which is dissolving. And obviously when there is mucus, the acid of the fruit dissolves that mucus, increases the acid, and this destroys the organs inwardly. So veganism is not an intelligent way of eating either, even though the original diet was vegan, because human beings ate fruits and leafy greens in very small amounts in the beginning, but they introduced starches because of the conditions of the weather, certain catastrophes. They even had to introduce meat. This is told in the book of Genesis. Obviously, a vegetarian diet which combines certain starches and even some animal products like dairy and eggs is a more viable diet to approach healthier conditions. If you remember, in Genesis 1:27, I think, or 1:28, it is said, there you have plants that produce seeds and trees that produce fruits with seeds. Those will be your food. That's what the natural architects wanted for the natural or carnal humans, not the spiritual humans. Because in Genesis 2, we are told about the soul Adam, that's the spiritual human. And this soul was a spiritual being, meant to eat from all the trees in the Garden of Eden, the paradise, except from the tree of knowledge of good and deficient. And that tree was the physical body with physical foods. So the first humans could have lived on energy alone, impressions, eating from the tree of life. However, those spiritual souls incarnated in flesh bodies before the appointed time. And that's how they were expelled. The lords, architects of nature, somehow made new vessels for the souls, the human souls. And this curse was summarized with the famous phrase, and you shall eat lechem, cooked food, or bread, with the sweat of your forehead. And the woman will give birth with pain, and so on. So from then onwards, humanity began to eat cooked food, starches. And therefore, the development of agriculture came after the expulsion from the Garden of Eden. And it is known how different star seeds introduce certain teachings concerning agriculture. In Egypt, this was known as the teachings of Osiris, the civilization god. And they taught humans how to plow, how to plant certain species of seeds, how to mix up seeds and get hybrid crops. And the more hybrid a plant is, the more starch it has. So over time, humanity began to eat a greater amount of starch, generating greater and greater amounts of mucus inside. And due to catastrophes, human beings also began to consume meat. That's even told in the book of Genesis, in the episode of the deluge. After the deluge, human beings are allowed to eat flesh. But there is a contradiction, because it was forbidden to eat blood, because the blood contains the soul, and they did not have to mix up animal soul with human soul. So there is even a contradiction in that. However, this just gives an idea of what is taking place. Human beings have become more and more degenerated, they live lesser years, and they have more and more diseases, the so-called diseases of the modern civilizations, which did not exist hundreds or thousands of years ago, even though some claim that now we live longer and have a better life, all of which is not true, because very advanced civilizations were destroyed because of catastrophes, and in the past there were much healthier human beings, taller, stronger, more intelligent, but even they were destroyed because of a degeneration in understanding, a twisted wisdom, which is the one which is operating in modern science in general. But we can see how we are sold those teachings with the label of healthy. We are told to eat more meat and more fat. Now they even make artificial meat, which is the future, according to some. And obviously, GMOs, genetically modified organisms, plants, which are not just hybrid, but altered in a lab. That's even worse, because that alters the own organism. Therefore, we have to approach a different way of eating. First of all, we have to eat less. We eat too much. 3, 4, 5, 6 times is too much. We have to see how to clean the body in order to allow a purification to take place, and therefore be able to get closer and closer to what we could call an original diet on Earth, even though the primordial diet did not use physical food. But obviously, the human being can live on leafy greens and fruits when the body is clean, when there is no obstruction of vitality. Therefore, a very important thing that we have to see in following classes is how to use even starches or animal proteins and fats to satiate, to give the body a sense of completeness, fullness, but without contaminating it too much or inflaming it too much. And in this way they are eaten at the end, after consuming the necessary sugars by means of cooking vegetables, because when you cook certain vegetables with small amounts of starch, you get simple sugars, which is what the body requires. That's why when you don't give the body the necessary sugars, you crave for sugar. So we need an intelligent way of supplying the body with what it needs: vitamins, minerals, simple sugars, enzymes. Even though that's not easy, because nowadays the soils are very poor in minerals, and most fruits are devoid of vitamins because they are cultivated very fast. And therefore we have to understand how to get what we need, understanding that less is more. So we have to approach things very simply, without complicating life, because true life is more simple than what we think. And we should not forget either that the physical body is an alchemical organism that not only produces macronutrients and builds up tissues with proteins, making its own proteins, but also produces its own substances, enzymes, even vitamins. So this is not a question of eliminating all animal proteins or all starches. Those are radical approaches that do not work. We have to be humble also and see in which condition is our body. For instance, those of us who have severe pathologies because of accidents or whatever need to take care of the food we eat and decrease the level of inflammation. And just to give you an example, 2 decades ago I was playing football and I received a very heavy impact on my chest. So from then onwards I start to have a pain in the cardiac area. So that obviously indicated there was some damage. But over time I realized that after eating certain fats and animal foods, my chest was painful. And it took me many years to realize that animal foods and fats are inflammatory, the starches are inflammatory. However, when I began to reduce those products and began to consume more starchless vegetables and minimum amounts of starch, or even little animal products like boiled eggs or omelettes, then my chest pain went away. And the funny thing is that in principle I was treating other symptoms such as congestion, allergies, systemic failure of organs. I had many severe health problems, but those gradually decreased and I recovered levels of energy which I didn't have for a long time. And I don't follow radical diets, even though I was for 4 months what we could call vegan by force, because I could not eat much until I found a more balanced way of eating. And this can include small amounts of starch and certain proteins or even fats, but used strategically, not for nutrition. I even eliminated dairy because that's inflammatory and generates lots of mucus. That doesn't mean that one day I cannot eat cheese. even though my body is intolerant to dairy and even allergic, because if I eat too much, I experience certain itching, and all because certain processes that I experience. And I'm also becoming more and more aware of the relation between our mind, emotions, and the way we eat. Therefore, in following classes, we'll have to see the relation between our psyche and how we eat, and also how to approach a more starchless diet or with lower amounts of animal protein and animal fats. But we'll have to see all that step by step, because many things have to be taken into consideration. Not everyone is the same. Not everyone has the same level of toxicity inside. Mucus can be the house for bacterial overgrowth, fungi, which are behind many of the problems experienced by most people today. But there are other many toxic substances accumulated in the body, and all that has to be expelled little by little, not all of a sudden as vegans try to do, or the so-called raw foodists, which eat so much fruit and so much raw vegetables that they trigger very fast elimination processes, and this usually leads to disease and even a premature death, because the body cannot stand such a fast process of elimination. So let's take things easy. Let's go little by little. And for now, excuse the wind. I didn't know it was going to be so windy today. And thank you very much for listening with attention. Leave comments if you wish. Give thumbs up if this was inspiring to you. Subscribe to the channel and click on the bell if you want to receive weekly notifications. And until the next time, let's keep feeding holistically our mind, heart, and physical body, consciously, but opening a space for the manifestation of the supraconditional love and modified life, integral conscience, and deep, blissful serenity.